All of the seasoning in the world doesn't prepare you for the fact that the president of Exxon is missing.
Every minute and hour that goes by, everybody's concern is being raised.
They're desperate for Sydney Riso's safe return and the arrest of the kidnappers.
It was a scene like the movie Dirty Harry, where they were taking me from one location to another.
This was as brutal a crime as one can imagine. He had to have been in enormous pain, not just physically, but psychologically.
In the New York City suburb of Morris Township, New Jersey, the morning of April 29th, 1992, starts like any other for Sydney Riso and his wife, Patricia. He was the president of the international division of the Exxon Corporation.
Good morning, dear.
Good morning.
Sid was very down to earth, family man, church going, very, very nice guy.
Have a good one.
Every morning, the high-powered executive follows the same modest routine.
Many other people in the Fortune 500 companies around the country availed themselves of the services of chauffeurs and private drivers and limousines, but Sid Riso, who was a very humble man, every day drove to the end of his driveway, picked up the local newspaper, he drove himself off to Exxon.
He left his residence around 7:25 in the morning, and one of the neighbors noticed the car probably about a half an hour after that. Called Mrs. Riso. She obviously knew this was out of character and became quite concerned naturally, and immediately called the Morris Township Police Department.
No one can believe it. Sydney Riso seems to have vanished without a trace.
All of the seasoning in the world doesn't prepare you for the fact that the president of Exxon is missing.
And investigators' concerns quickly mount when they learn that Riso has a heart condition.
Perhaps he had gotten ill and wandered off from the car, maybe perhaps being disoriented. And that was why the Morris County Prosecutor's Office called in a search and rescue dog team to comb that area in the potential that Mr. Riso could be lying there.
But the search comes up empty. And while authorities continue to scour the surrounding area, detectives have to consider the possibility that Riso disappeared on purpose.
Mr. Riso was, one, enormously successful, two, a very decent man, great relationship with his wife and his family, so there was no reason to believe that suddenly he had a break with reality and would have run away. And so at that point, probably within half an hour or so, we began to treat this as a missing persons case with an eye towards kidnapping.
It isn't long before a team from the FBI's Newark field office descends on Morris Township to support the investigation.
Your mind is very much open to any possibility. We didn't really know exactly what we had.
I was unsure whether it was a missing persons or if it was a kidnapping.
We looked in the area around the car for any bloodstains, shell casing, cigarette butts, anything that seemed to be out of place. There was really no significant forensic evidence of value that was recovered that first day.
As a next step, the Bureau, alongside local law enforcement, establishes a command center in the Riso's den.
We had no idea whether or not the family may be in jeopardy as well. So to have the command post at that location served two purposes: protect the family and keep the integrity of the crime scene.
Traditionally, in any type of kidnapping, there's a telephone call made to the victim's family. So we did set up a trap and trace so we could record any calls and trace the origin that were made to the house. We also put agents on the perimeter. for surveillance purposes, see if anyone was coming by, checking the neighborhood.
But the hours pass with no word on Reso.
There was no ransom demand initially, so we were kind of perplexed as to what his status was.
Every minute and hour that goes by, everybody's concern is being raised.
By the end of the first 24 hours, investigators have no witnesses, no leads, and no way of bringing Sydney Riso home. Then, at 10:13 the next morning, a disturbing phone call comes into Exxon headquarters in Florham Park, New Jersey. A female caller instructs company representatives to retrieve a letter from a light pole at the nearby Livingston Mall.
It had the information in it about who Sydney Riso was and the background information. We had received his credit card that proved that they had Sydney Riso in custody. It was signed Fernando Pereira Brigade, Warriors of the Rainbow.
The items give investigators some insight into the kidnappers' level of expertise.
At this point, somebody actually kidnapped Mr. Riso, and they had done it, fairly efficiently. And by the way they wrote the letter and including the credit card, it made us realize that this is somebody that knows what they're doing.
The letter also demands an $18.5 million ransom to compensate for Exxon's environmental transgressions. But the terms are complicated.
We would obtain a cellular telephone, publish the number in the newspaper, reversing the last 4 digits. So the number that was in the newspaper, only they would know to call, reversing the last 4 digits.
The notes themselves gave us a great deal of anxiety, not only the ransom demand, how excessive it was, but because of the fact the notes purported to be from a group of environmental terrorists.
And the letter comes with a stern warning. Mr. Riso will be held in total isolation with no food or water. If you do not fully comply, you will most certainly die.
When it's a life-threatening situation, I mean, we're professionally engaged, but you also can't help but be emotionally engaged in this. A lot of high energy involved in a case like this. It's sort of a race against time. You want to get this resolved quickly so that you can get that person back. "24 hours after the abduction of Exxon International President Sydney Riso, all FBI agents have to work with is a mysterious demand letter and a ticking clock. Most people can go several days without food, but after 3 to 5 days with no water, the body begins to shut down. And Sydney Riso's heart condition makes matters even worse.
A lot depends on their health, a lot depends on their temperature.
While investigators desperately await the next communication, they do their best to get a bead on the environmental group taking responsibility for the abduction.
They call themselves the Rainbow Warrior, and it was signed Fernando Pereira Brigade. Fernando Pereira was a member of Greenpeace, which is an environmental group. And back in 1985, they had a ship called the Rainbow Warrior that was actually blown up by French agents. And during the course of that incident, there was a photographer on board the Rainbow Warrior by the name of Fernando Pereira that was killed.
Their demand was $18.5 million. Perhaps that was their figure for reparations for the Exxon Valdez.
Investigators scour their criminal databases, but find no evidence of a group called Warriors of the Rainbow. Still, agents suspect the culprits could be tied to a faction operating within the radical environmental movement.
This also happened right around the time that the Earth Summit was going to be held in Rio de Janeiro. So there were a number of factors that were leading us towards the ecological terrorist group.
But as the environmental leads begin to dry up, the investigative team grows increasingly concerned. They have no idea what condition Reso is in or how long he can hold out. One thing they do know, however, is that Exxon has a history of paying large ransoms.
In 1974, an Exxon executive by the name of Victor Samuelson was kidnapped. And he was kidnapped in Argentina. And Exxon paid a ransom demand of $14.5 million.
Eventually, Samuelson was released, and it's believed that the kidnappers were never captured.
The FBI never makes a recommendation to the family members whether or not they should pay a ransom. They always leave that decision to the family members or employers, as it was in this case. However, we have found that it is very unwise to ever pay a ransom unless you have absolute proof that the victim is currently alive.
But Exxon's willing to pay again if it means saving Reso's life. With nothing new to go on, investigators turn their attention to the ransom letter itself.
And what we look for are things within the forensics area of, are there fingerprints on the paper? Do they contain any DNA? This letter happened to have been typewritten, so we potentially can identify the typewriter.
But the results are disappointing.
There were no fingerprints. The typewriter was identified as being an IBM Selectric 2, which would be sold in numerous stores throughout the United States. We weren't getting very many leads from that particular end of things, but we were getting some information from our behavioral science people.
FBI profilers at Quantico feel the kidnappers are self-absorbed.
One of the big issues in a case like this is the narcissism of the individuals. And by that I'm talking about their sense that they're smarter than anyone else. The narcissism was apparent in the communications. Initially it was, don't get the police or the FBI involved. Well, it became clear very quickly that we were involved. Then it was, well, we're not really concerned. They felt they could outsmart us. So right away, you know you're dealing with narcissistic personalities. They think they can outsmart the police, the FBI, and everyone else.
And something else about the correspondence strikes a chord.
Only about a quarter of the letter dealt with ecology, and about 3/4 of it or so dealt with the money. So what's the focus? What are they really interested in? It looked to us like they were interested primarily in the money, and that the eco-terrorism thing was just a charade, a camouflage to misdirect the investigation.
We thought the possibility of maybe it was an environmental group, but again, there's the money. Most criminals will do this for the money. They're not there to make a political statement.
But while the kidnappers' real motive remains a question mark, one thing is for sure: Sydney Riso's time is running out, and law enforcement is feeling the pressure.
Well, in a case like this, every waking moment and even sleepless nights were consumed by the conduct of this investigation. "48 hours after the abduction, investigators run a classified ad with the cell phone number specified in the ransom note. And it isn't long before they get a response.
It seemed that the kidnapper was either holding his nose to disguise his voice, or that he was garbling his voice somehow, which made it very difficult to be able to recognize a voice.
The question that we kept asking the kidnappers is, we need current proof, visible or otherwise, of the continuing well-being of the kidnapped victim. They had his voice on tape, which they were able to play for us.
But no one can confirm that the voice is in fact Riso's.
The stress in the voice, the circumstances that he was under, being kidnapped, held for ransom, and that tape recording was played for the family, who at that time weren't able to recognize it as Sydney Riso's voice.
The instructions are straightforward and too brief to offer investigators any new insights.
The exact words were, go to Lewis Morris Park and look on the ground for a letter.
At the time, there was a white rock, and by that white rock was a letter, sealed letter. It set out all the directions and information and what the kidnappers were looking to accomplish.
This new letter expresses displeasure that information was leaked to the press and threatens the kidnapping of 2 more Exxon employees if their demands are not met.
That created another problem for me personally, because now I had to deploy even more of my staff to guard other Exxon executives.
The kidnappers instruct corporate staff to place the money in Eddie Bauer duffel bags and await further instructions.
This is one of the Eddie Bauer bags that we were asked to put the money in for the ransom demand, and we were ordered to have 10 of these available.
I don't think he realized that $18.5 million American currency wrapped up in cash filled 15 duffel bags.
Then, on May 3rd, 4 days after the kidnapping, the task force gets another call. And this time, investigators are able to gather critical new clues.
The very first indication we had of anyone involved was a female, and then shortly after that, a male was involved in the communication. So now we have a couple.
The location of the communications and telephone calls were all in a 2 or 3 county area, and that led us to believe that our kidnappers were not some international terrorist group, that our kidnappers were based within the same geographic area as the communications were coming from.
The caller asks for an Exxon representative to wait at a phone booth outside a restaurant in Summit, New Jersey for more details. He's also instructed to have the ransom money with him.
I assumed the role of James Maracus, who was the public information officer.
Dozens of backup agents and police officers move into position with the single-minded objective: bring Sydney Riso home in one piece. But they know all too well they're at the mercy of an unpredictable enemy.
Our concern from the behavioral science unit was that, can we keep these people on the hook? Can we keep them communicating with us? If they shut down and they disappear and they get scared and they run away, our job of finding them and finding Risos can get that person back.
As of 2009, the FBI had a total of 31,891 employees, which includes over 13,000 special agents and nearly 19,000 support professionals. Four days after the abduction of Sydney Riso, a Bureau special agent, posing as an Exxon executive, awaits the most recent instructions at a restaurant payphone in Summit, New Jersey. More than 100 agents and detectives are positioned in the vicinity, ready to spring into action.
It was a go, and we truly believed that we were going to make this drop and hopefully make the arrest.
Unknown to the kidnappers, the ransom money is still at the Riso home. Instead, there are 10 bags stuffed with cut-up newspaper in the back of Sydney Riso's car that an FBI agent is driving.
This specific location was the area where I was supposed to get the first phone call. We were all prepared.
All of a sudden, there's no communication. I mean, it's quiet. There's nothing going on. And it was like a silence that, like you could cut with a knife. It was like, oh God, what happened here, And now, since I'm one of the responsible people in the command post, everybody's turning towards me and saying, what happened here? What did it go bad? What occurred? And I'm saying, I don't know.
Hours go by with no word from the kidnappers.
It was really a frustrating night. And all we needed for them was to make the call and us to proceed with the directions. So after hours of waiting and not getting that phone call, I think everybody involved was really disheartened by the fact that nothing happened.
The drop is a bust, and with time running out for Sydney Riso, the task force scrambles for anything that can keep their investigation alive. They soon turn back to the Behavioral Science Unit at Quantico, where agents review the most recent data on the suspects.
What's the profile? And we told them, well, it's a white couple, middle-aged, yuppies or wannabe yuppies in Morristown, New Jersey. They live there, and they have a golden retriever. And they're in financially desperate situations, and the male, the offender, dominant offender, either has law enforcement background or security background, or maybe both. We base everything on a totality of the evidence and the circumstance. The original letters were going up to the lab. Well, they were finding golden retriever hair in those letters, which fit in with the yuppiness. Now, where did that come from? They were demanding $18.5 million, and they wanted them put in 10 green Eddie Bauer duffel bags. You could just say 10 duffel bags, but they were being specific. They wanted Eddie Bauer duffel bags. Well, who wants Eddie Bauer? This is a yuppie-ish sort of thing. So it was that flavor that just kept leaking out of the communications. He's talking about surveillances and using terms that were sort of unique or to law enforcement or security. The Morristown, New Jersey, why? Why do we think they were there? Because they wanted the communications in the Star Ledger newspaper.
Narrowed down the universe of suspects to about 100 million people.
Agents must also take into account that one or both kidnappers could be disgruntled former employees.
This case grew and grew and grew. We had 10,000 employee records from Exxon of people that either had been fired or let go. Exxon had had a massive layoff in the previous year, so we had any number of employees involved there. So instead of getting smaller, our investigation got bigger and bigger.
Days go by without any further instructions from the kidnappers, and no word on Riso's condition.
We had a lull in any communication with the kidnappers, which was very frustrating and concerned us a great deal, because anytime you lose communication with a kidnapper, you always are concerned for the worst possible scenario.
Then, an agonizing 11 days later, the kidnappers finally reach out to Riso's wife, Patricia. But this time, they have a crude and bizarre demand. They want Mrs. Riso to make a public statement.
I know in my heart that he's alive. I pray that he is healthy.
It was so offensive to me that they made this demand of this woman who'd already been victimized to appear and beg for the life of her husband.
I love Sydney, and I want him to come home to us. And I hope that he will be released very soon. I am making a personal appeal to some people who I want to believe have my husband with them.
At the kidnappers' request, Patricia Riso makes a public statement indicating she has received their message. It's a strange demand, but investigators believe the kidnappers are trying to show that they are in control.
I am willing to do whatever is necessary to have him reunited with us.
Still, the appeal seems to fall on deaf ears as another 2 weeks go by with little communication from Sydney Riso's abductors.
There was an enormous amount of pressure that built and built in this case. Sometimes weeks of frustration. We heard nothing from the kidnappers, and you're desperate for some contact, desperate for some breaks, some glimmer of hope that would lead you to, one, Sydney Riso's safe return, and two, the arrest of the kidnappers.
The task force soon moves from the Reso home to a Morris County prosecutor's office, where investigators can work around the clock to turn up new leads.
In one instance, we learned that the girlfriend of a person that's been convicted of numerous heinous crimes in this county was actually working in an office very close to Sydney Riso's. So I just thought this was it. But that was one of those leads that went flat. There were hundreds and hundreds of leads that just went flat.
There are many times in the command center I used to walk out and take a break for a cup of coffee and realize with everything we had deployed, all the people, all the investigative skills, all the techniques, all the technology, my only fear was that the kidnappers wouldn't come and ask for the money.
And so there's a lot of pressure on us, a lot of pressure on everybody to keep this thing going and to get a resolution.
For about 2 weeks, there is a lull in communication from the kidnappers. Then, in the beginning of June, over a month since Sydney Riso's abduction, the task force gets the call they've been waiting for.
We received a telephone call at 2:55 p.m. Indicating that we should be ready for something to happen. And between that time until almost 9 o'clock at night, we received several more phone calls indicating that something was going to be happening that we should be prepared for.
The momentum and the excitement was building because we knew that people were going to be in danger. There was a lot of tension, a lot of focus.
And at about 8 minutes after 9, on the night of June 18th, we received a phone call that basically said, "Leave now."
Go to Tingley Road, Tingley.
They were directed to go to Tingley Road at Patriots Path and pick up a letter.
The kidnappers instruct the Reso family to be ready to bring them the ransom money in Sid Riso's car. Riso's daughter Renee will accompany Exxon Public Relations head Jim Maracus. Further directions will follow.
We had an undercover female FBI agent driving the vehicle who resembled Renee Riso, and I assumed the role of Jim Maracus.
The delivery car was a small subcompact station wagon. The rear tire had been removed so that an agent could secrete himself armed with an automatic weapon beneath the bags.
We took stringent steps not only to be able to apprehend the kidnappers, but also to protect our personnel.
The agents are wired, and their vehicle has been painted with chemicals so that a surveillance plane overhead can track their every move. The letter instructs the drop team to proceed to a general store 5 miles away. But at 9:23 p.m., the cell phone in the delivery car rings, and the kidnappers ask the agent impersonating Riso's daughter a question she can't answer.
Who are you? I'm Renee. Address in Houston. What? Your address in Houston. I don't live in Houston. I live in Washington, D.C. Mom and Dad live in Houston. This is Jim. Renee's pretty upset. We're en route. We got your directions, and we're en route right now. We're making the turn. Just bear with us because we're not used to doing this. We're a little nervous. Hello? Your location.
The kidnappers keep the drop team on the run through the hills of New Jersey, unsure of their final destination or the status of Sydney Riso.
We're rushing as quickly as we can.
Frustrations grow as agents are instructed to proceed to yet another location, a train station in Far Hills, New Jersey. Still, the team has no choice but to go along with the kidnappers' instructions. It's clear that even the slightest misstep could have dire consequences, and time is quickly running out.
It was out of a scene like the movie Dirty Harry, where they were taking me from one location to another, and just not knowing where I was going to be led, but just hoping that at the end of the day we'd have a shot at arresting these people.
Meanwhile, 250 FBI agents and an additional 100 local officers stake out area phone booths looking for any sign of suspicious activity.
Special Agent Carrie Brzezinski had positioned herself at one of her locations, which was at the Chester Mall. And she was just getting herself settled in her vehicle when she noticed another vehicle pull up. And it seemed rather strange because there were no stores open in that section of the mall. And as Carrie watched, a white male proceeded to make a telephone call. And she noticed him because he was wearing latex gloves at the time.
At that exact moment, a call comes in on the kidnapper's line.
Before we answered the cell phone,
I have eyes on someone making a call right now.
we would get on the radio and tell all the surveillance teams, we have an incoming phone call. Watch your payphone.
In the command post, we were receiving information from the telephone company of where a call was being traced to, and it was to the Chester Mall. And Agent Carrie Brzezinski got the description of the individual, the license plate of the vehicle, and description of the vehicle that the individual was driving.
As agents run the plates on the mysterious caller, the drop team arrives at the Far Hills train station. The instructions are for Jim Marakis to board the next train with the money, but they're too late. The train has already come and gone.
Well, this was the final destination where I was supposed to get onto the train with the money and be in a position to drop the money where he directed me to drop it. After sending me from one location to another, there just was not enough time allotted for me to get here and able to get on the train that he had wanted me to get on.
The delivery team were told to go fast and then slow down. It was very difficult for them to try to make the deadlines that were demanded by the kidnappers.
I was waiting with great anticipation for the next set of instructions, which I hoped would be to get on to the next train, and waiting for the phone to ring. That phone call never came.
But while the mission appears to have hit a dead end, the search for the man from the Chester Mall payphone is just heating up.
We then could trace the registration of that vehicle as being a rental vehicle coming back to Betty's Rental, which was out in Hackettstown, New Jersey. We sent a group of agents and local law enforcement out there to be able to interview Betty and potentially find the rental agreement, with the hopes that we would get more information about who rented this vehicle.
At the rental agency, the team spots a man and woman about to return a car. For a moment, investigators can hardly believe their eyes.
Used to work for Exxon.
Both the man and the car match the description given by the Chester Mall agent to a T.
I told him, I said, you know, we've been looking for Mr. Riso. You know, he's missing. He tells me, oh yeah, I've heard about that. And I told him, well, let me tell you something. He's not missing, he's been kidnapped, and you did it. Now, where is he?
Sir, how you doing?
After an exasperating 2-month game of cat and mouse, the task force finally arrests 2 suspects in the kidnapping of Sydney Riso. Local couple Arthur and Irene Seal.
They looked like a very typical middle-class suburban yuppie couple.
In the mid-'80s, Arthur Seal, an ex-cop, was working as a security expert at Exxon International, and even claimed to have helped devise their policy on executive security. He earned a good salary and owned an expensive home.
This was a man, based on his behaviors and his grandiose ideas, in my estimation, who really had a burning desire to live the lifestyles of the rich and famous. He got some money at the time of his departure from Exxon. They were having reductions in force, and he took that money and instead of investing it, buying a house, training himself for some other position, he wanted to be in resorts. He wanted to be where international travelers and the cream of society gathered.
They envisioned a lifestyle that was really above their means.
They believed that they were entitled to a better lifestyle than they had, and that this was like hitting the lotto for them. They were going to score big and then live the life they wanted to live.
I think their grandiose ideas led them to this decision to kidnap an Exxon executive, and I think they felt Sydney Riso was probably the most accessible of those that they looked at.
Now, the race is on to find out whether their victim is alive or dead.
Arthur Seal consented to a search of his car, and in his trunk there were Exxon personnel directories, some plastic bags, shovels, other evidence which would lead us to believe that this was somebody who was involved in the kidnapping.
But there is no indication of Sydney Riso's whereabouts, and so far, the SEALs aren't talking. As time continues to run out, investigators' top priority is finding Sydney Riso. With the two suspects in jail, Riso is most likely on his own and possibly in need of immediate medical attention. Desperate to find him before it's too late, a team quickly descends on the SEALs' nearby residence. To their dismay, there's no sign of the kidnapped executive, but they do find more evidence linking them to the crime. An instruction manual for would-be money launderers and information on foreign bank accounts. There are also several weapons and a brand new passport application. But the most critical discovery is a document connecting the SEALs to a storage unit in Washington, New Jersey.
I was elated. I was convinced beyond any reasonable doubt that Sydney Riso was alive, and the storage unit was empty, and there was no sign of Sydney Riso or any of his belongings.
With Arthur Seal still refusing to talk, agents' only hope is to get Irene, also known as Jackie, to come clean before it's too late.
And I was elated that both of them were in custody and I would have a shot at interviewing Irene Seal.
Eventually, Jackie cuts a deal with the prosecutor, and after a roller coaster 7 weeks, authorities finally learn the full truth behind the tragic case of Sydney Riso. According to Jackie, the couple observed Riso for months before finally taking action. But on the day of his abduction, the plan quickly goes awry.
He was shot in the arm, and the shot entered at the lower part of the forearm and exited above the elbow. So it was a fairly massive wound.
The SEALs restrain their injured captive and place him in a wooden coffin-like box that Arthur Seal had built just for that purpose. They then place the box in a storage facility with no light and little ventilation. The SEALs would return just twice daily to give Riso a small amount of water and vitamins.
Should we be looking for something?
I asked her if she gave him anything to eat, and she said no. She said, we didn't. I said, well, how could you not feed him? She said, we didn't make any arrangements for him to relieve himself. I can't even imagine how difficult it had to be, and the insensitivity of them, both Arthur and Jackie Seal. I said, it's been 52 days, and the family's gone through an agonizing time, not knowing whether their loved one was dead or alive. And I said, if you were me, would you be looking for someone who was dead or alive? And she just dropped her head. And I just gently picked up her chin. I said, dead or alive? And she said, probably dead. I said, how can you be sure? She said, well, she says, I helped him bring the body into this wooded area.
Jackie Seal always seemed to be somewhat detached from the investigation and from the potential trouble that she was in. She often spoke about running aerobics classes in the jail or cleaning her jail cell. She did not seem to have a real connection to what had happened during this investigation, that they had kidnapped an individual and that he had died as a result of them kidnapping him. There didn't seem to be a reality with her as to what was going on.
Inside the unventilated metal storage unit, temperatures likely climb to over 100 degrees.
This is an horrific crime. The way they conducted it was as inhuman as one can imagine. To be taken away from your family in the hands of strangers, placed inside this airless, perforated, nothing could better describe it than a pre-death coffin. And he had to have been in enormous pain, not just physically, but psychologically.
By day 4, Sydney Riso simply stops breathing.
Not to be able to rescue him alive was, I think, difficult for everyone involved because we all, had hoped that would be the outcome.
Jackie Seal insists that Sydney Riso's death was an accident, that she and her husband never meant for him to die. But Arthur Seal's defense attorney goes a step further, arguing that Riso died from natural causes.
I don't know if dying in a shed in 9-degree temperature where you can't even get up to relieve yourself is dying of natural causes. They knew Sydney Riso had a heart condition. They knew he needed medication. They never fed the man. They gave him crushed vitamins and water to sustain him. So if that's natural causes, Arthur Seal's definition of natural causes is different than mine.
In her defense, Jackie claims to be a battered wife, under the spell of a tyrant husband.
Jackie's mother never liked Art, so Mom went in to see Jackie and had a heart-to-heart with her, and I think convinced her that she needed to do the right thing and cut herself loose from Art and take care of herself for once and not be sucked into this thing with Artie. And that really opened the door.
It was critical that we had the cooperation of Jackie Seal because she was ultimately able to lead us to where the body was buried. It was all the way in the southern New Jersey in this area called the Pine Barrens.
We don't actually know the cause of death. The medical examiner could only say that it was a violent act and that it was homicide, but he could not give us any medical reason.
On July 1st, Jackie Seal pleads guilty. In exchange for her cooperation, she gets a reduced sentence of 20 years in prison. She is eligible for release as early as November 2009. Arthur Seal originally pleads not guilty. Then, in September of 1992, changes his plea to guilty. He is sentenced to 95 years without parole and a consecutive life sentence on federal and state extortion, conspiracy, and kidnapping charges.
He's just pure evil. He's just pure evil.
I think anyone who worked the case was certainly affected by the outcome of the case because we all collectively had worked so hard hoping to rescue Sydney Riso, arrest the individuals responsible for his kidnapping, and unfortunately we arrested the kidnappers but were not able to save Sydney Riso.